Imagine a woman just pacing the floors of her estate in absolute desperation.
Right.
The heat of ancient India is just pressing in on her. But she is, like, completely consumed by this cold panic.
Oh, yeah.
Because she's made a promise to a sick, dying man.
Yeah.
A really simple promise, honestly. Just a bowl of meat broth to help him recover from this severe medical treatment.
Just a basic necessity.
Exactly. But the city markets are entirely shut down. The butcher stalls are completely empty.
Right. There's absolutely nothing available.
So in this terrifying, just visceral act of devotion, she walks into her private quarters. She takes a sharp blade, and she literally slices a thick cut of flesh directly from her own thigh.
It's just unimaginable.
It really is. She hands her own bleeding skin and muscle to a maid, instructs her to boil it into a broth, and sends it to the dying man.
Wow.
And the most shocking part of this entirely true historical account, the man just drinks it blindly.
Doesn't even ask a question.
Doesn't ask a thing. He recovers. And when the founder of his religion finds out about it, it triggers this massive crisis that permanently alters the laws of a 2.5 millennia old tradition.
I mean, it is the absolute definition of high-stakes consumption.
Right.
We often think of, ancient religious texts as these serene philosophical musings recorded under quiet trees.
Right. Guys just meditating peacefully.
Exactly. But the reality is that early spiritual communities were fighting for their lives. They were navigating this landscape written in blood, in political survival, and the very real threat of apex predators.
Yeah. So welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is to just pull apart this masterclass in survival, public relations, and human psychology that's hidden inside the Vinaya Pitaka.
Which is such a fascinating text.
It is. For those unfamiliar, the Vinaya Pitaka is basically the foundational monastic code of Buddhism, but specifically, we are examining a deeply mysterious section known as the Mamsa 10.
The Mamsa 10.
Right, these are 10 specific types of meat that Buddhist monks are categorically forbidden from eating under penalty of severe monastic law.
No exceptions.
And I assure you, you sitting there listening to this right now, the architecture of these ancient rules is shockingly relevant to how you navigate societal norms,
right?
How you filter the media you consume, and honestly, how you protect your own mind today.
Because, the Mamsa 10 is not just a dietary restriction.
Right.
Like, modern dietary restrictions are usually about personal biology, right? Lowering cholesterol, preventing an allergic reaction.
Or aligning with a personal ethical stance on factory farming, that kind of thing.
Exactly. But the Mamsa 10 is a legislative firewall. It was built piece by piece to protect a really fragile wandering community from being destroyed by the state.
Or devoured by the jungle.
Yeah, or consumed by their own psychological horrors.
Well, let's drop right into that bustling, thriving metropolis of ancient Varanasi to understand how this firewall started. Varanasi was this massive spiritual epicenter.
Oh, completely packed.
Right? Packed with different sects, ascetics, wealthy merchants. And in this city, we meet Supiya. She and her husband are wealthy lay followers of the historical Buddha.
And their devotion isn't casual.
No, not at all. They are what we would basically consider elite patrons. Like, their entire social identity and daily routine revolve around funding and caring for the local monastic community.
Because elite patronage in this era was a full-time occupation.
Yeah.
Supiya wasn't just like tossing a coin in a beggar's bowl. She was walking from monastery to monastery, literally conducting triage.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she was asking, who has a fever, who needs robes repaired, what specific medicines are missing.
Because the survival of these monks depended entirely on that, right?
Yeah.
Since they renounced all personal property and wealth.
Exactly. They depended entirely on the hypervigilance of people like Supiya.
So during one of her daily rounds, Supiya finds a monk who is critically ill. And ancient medicine was brutal.
So brutal.
This monk had just taken a powerful purgative. Essentially, he swallowed a violent system-clearing laxative meant to flush an illness from his body.
Right.
And has left him completely depleted. He tells Supiya he desperately needs meat broth to rebuild his strength. Without it, he feels he might not actually survive the treatment.
So she promises to provide it.
Instantly. Supiya immediately promises. She rushes home, commands her servants to go into the markets of Varanasi and just buy meat for the broth. But they run into an absolute legal wall.
Yeah, because the servants return empty-handed. Varanasi is observing a strict, citywide no-slaughter day.
Which was a thing back then.
Oh, definitely. This was a relatively common legislative tool in ancient Indian kingdoms. It was often tied to lunar cycles or specific holy days or sometimes just royal decrees.
So you just couldn't get meat.
On a no-slaughter day, the penalty for killing an animal or selling meat was catastrophic. The entire supply chain of meat in a massive city just ground to an absolute halt.
Okay, so put yourself in Sapia's mind at that exact moment.
Yeah, it's intense.
She is a woman whose entire sense of self-worth is tied to keeping these monks alive. She made a promise. She genuinely believes this monk is fading away in his cell.
Right.
The guilt and the religious zealotry, they compound into this psychological breaking point. She doesn't just feel bad. She feels like she is failing her ultimate spiritual duty.
Which leads to the unthinkable.
Exactly. So she takes the knife, she cuts her own thigh. I know, it's intense.
Yeah.
She gives her own flesh to her maid, orders her to cook it, deliver it to the monk, and cover for her by saying she has fallen ill and just cannot leave her bed.
And the maid executes the plan perfectly.
She really does.
The monk receives the broth, and here is the crucial, fateful detail. The monk is so weakened and perhaps so trusting of Sapia's household that he simply drinks the broth without asking a single question.
Nothing at all.
He does not ask how they procured meat on a legally enforced no-slaughter day. He consumes human flesh in complete ignorance.
He recovers his strength, totally unaware he just committed an act of cannibalism.
Right.
Meanwhile, Sapia's husband comes home. He finds his wife in bed, bleeding profusely from a self-inflicted wound. And when she confesses what she did, his reaction completely subverts our modern expectations.
Oh, entirely.
He doesn't call a physician. He doesn't recoil in horror. The texts tell us he is ecstatic.
Thrilled, even.
Yeah. He is so profoundly moved by the sheer magnitude of her faith that he immediately goes to the Buddha to boast about his wife's devotion, inviting the Buddha to their home for a meal the very next day.
And this reaction highlights a really dangerous cultural current in ancient India.
Oh, so?
Well, extreme self-sacrifice, even self-mutilation, was heavily romanticized in various ascetic traditions of the time.
Oh, I see.
So the husband views her act not as self-harm, but as the ultimate currency of devotion. He fully expects the Buddha to validate and praise her.
And initially, it seems like the Buddha does exactly that. The Buddha arrives at the estate, insists on seeing Sapia despite her being bedridden.
Yeah.
And the text described this miraculous event.
A literal miracle.
Right. The moment Sapia comes into the presence of the Buddha, her gruesome wound instantly heals. The flesh knits back together, leaving not even a scar. Her physical body is restored as a direct testament to the purity of her intention.
Because the restoration of her body is a profound narrative device. It establishes that her heart was completely pure. She acted out of selfless love and overwhelming generosity.
Okay, but wait, let's unpack this. This is like the ultimate terrifying form of door-dashing a meal for a sick friend, but using your own body.
Yeah, it really is.
But if her intent was undeniably pure, and the Buddha himself miraculously healed her, recognizing that pure intent, why is the very next thing the Buddha does a complete crackdown?
That's the big question.
Right. He leaves the house, returns to the monastery, summons every single monk, publicly reprimands the monk who drank the broth, and permanently outlaws the consumption of human meat.
Yeah, he does.
It feels like a massive contradiction. If the act was born of pure love, why legislate against it so aggressively?
Because the Buddha is drawing a permanent, uncrossable line between intention and wisdom.
Okay, explain that.
He honors Sapia's pure heart, but he utterly condemns the mechanics of her action. You see, the Buddha's philosophical framework is known as the middle way.
Right, the middle way.
And it is a path that deliberately avoids the extremes of both hedonistic indulgence and violent self-mortification. By establishing a law immediately after this event, he is sending a message to his entire following.
Which is?
That pure faith, when decoupled from wisdom, is lethal.
Ah, I see. It's a preventative measure against a cult of martyrdom.
Exactly.
Because if he had praised the act publicly and left it at that, you can easily imagine a terrifying escalation. Devout followers would start believing that the fastest way to achieve spiritual merit is to literally feed themselves to the monastic order.
Yeah, it would be a disaster.
You would have people chopping off fingers to make soup.
Precisely. He strips the romance out of the violence. He dictates that self-mutilation is a void or invalid spiritual act. It earns you nothing. And what's fascinating here is that this transition moves us from a shocking personal anecdote into the necessity of systemic institutional law.
Right. It forces his hand.
Sapia's act is the catalyst that forces the Buddha to institute the very first of the Mamsa 10. the absolute ban on human meat. The penalty for a monk who knowingly eats human flesh is designated as a thulakaya offense.
Thukaya. How severe is a thulakaya in the grand scheme of the monastic rulebook?
Oh, it is a grave offense.
Really?
In the Vinaya, the absolute worst crimes like murder or sexual intercourse are parajika, meaning immediate and permanent expulsion.
Okay.
A thulakaya is just below that. It translates roughly to a grave transgression. It requires formal confession, immediate behavioral correction, and a heavy period of penance.
So it's a glaring red flag on a monk's spiritual record.
Exactly. It's huge.
So to understand why the punishment is so severe, we have to look at the underlying architecture of this specific ban. There are 3 pillars supporting the prohibition of human meat, and the first is purely about public relations.
Yes. Consider the mechanics of how this religion survived. These monks owned nothing. They had no farms, no treasury.
They relied on donations.
Every single morning, they walked barefoot into villages and cities, holding an empty alms bowl, completely reliant on the goodwill of the lay people to drop a scoop of rice or some vegetables into that bowl.
So their survival depended on a delicate ecosystem of reverence and trust.
Precisely.
If a rumor starts spreading through Varanasi
Yeah.
that the followers of the Buddha are eating human flesh, that trust evaporates overnight.
Immediately.
They wouldn't be seen as holy men anymore. They would be viewed as ghouls. I mean,
Yeah.
think about the mythology of ancient India. The forests were supposedly full of yakas, right? These flesh-eating ogres and demons.
Exactly, the yakas.
If the monks are associated with cannibalism, mothers hide their children when the monks walk into town. The alms dry up, and the religion starves to death in a matter of weeks.
The public relations disaster would be unrecoverable. Now, the second pillar supporting the ban addresses physical safety and the dark extremes of human fanaticism. We already discussed the danger of lay people mutilating themselves, but what happens during a severe, multi-year famine?
Oh, right.
When crops fail and people are starving in the streets? Morality frays.
It really does. Because if human meat were technically permissible under certain religious loopholes, you open a terrifying door.
You really do.
You might have hyper-zealous followers murdering vulnerable people, the sick, the outcasts, just to feed the monks and gain spiritual merit.
Or the public might accuse the monks themselves.
Yeah. Accuse them of prowling the charnel grounds at night, robbing graves to survive.
Right.
By instituting a total uncompromising ban, the Buddha builds a legislative firewall. He protects the monks from ever being implicated in the darkest crimes of a starving society.
Exactly. And the third pillar is perhaps the most profound for the monks themselves: psychological empathy. The core practice of a Buddhist monk is cultivating a mind of boundless compassion and loving kindness known as metta. The texts are explicit that consuming one's own species destroys a vital, delicate mechanism within the human psyche.
It hardens the heart. I mean, you cannot view humanity with boundless, pure compassion if you view humanity as a potential food source.
No, you can't.
The cognitive dissonance would shatter the meditative state entirely.
It creates an insurmountable psychological barrier. Cannibalism is deeply, fundamentally unnatural to the baseline human psyche.
Yeah, it's a huge taboo.
Breaking that ultimate taboo induces a profound spiritual callousness. The Buddha knew that a mind tainted by the consumption of human flesh could never achieve enlightenment.
But the legislation didn't stop at just banning the meat. When the Buddha reprimanded the monk who ate Sapia's broth, he instituted a secondary, equally important rule right there on the spot.
The rule of investigation.
The rule of investigation. The monk wasn't just punished for the meat. He was punished because he failed to ask where the meat came from on a day when all the butcher shops were closed.
And this is the genesis of mindful consumption.
Right.
The monk allowed his hunger and his illness to override his awareness. By failing to investigate the source of his food, he engaged in blind, careless consumption.
Yeah.
The Buddha codified the idea that ignorance is not an excuse for a spiritual practitioner. You must actively interrogate reality. You must know exactly what you are putting into your body and the chain of events that brought it to your bowl.
It's the ancient equivalent of demanding to see the supply chain.
Exactly.
So the human taboo is established. The logic is flawless. It protects the community's reputation, prevents murder, and preserves the monk's empathy.
Yeah.
But as we move down the Mamsa 10, the logic violently shifts.
It really takes a turn.
Yeah. The ban on humans makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But the next 2 animals on the forbidden list are elephants and horses. Why them?
Well, this requires a massive contextual leap. We are no longer dealing with biological taboos. We are dealing with the geopolitics of the ancient world.
Geopolitics. because you look at an elephant or a horse and you don't immediately think taboo meat.
No, you don't.
They aren't humans, and they aren't man-eating predators. So why are they banned with the exact same severity as cannibalism?
To understand this, you must strip away our modern perception of these animals. In the ancient Indian geopolitical landscape, an elephant was not a majestic zoo animal.
Right.
An elephant was a weapon of mass destruction.
Wow.
It was the absolute pinnacle of military technology. A king's power, his ability to conquer neighbors and maintain order, was quantified by the number of war elephants in his vanguard. They were living siege engines.
And the horses were the ancient equivalent of rapid deployment cavalry and elite communication networks.
Exactly.
They were the infrastructure of empire. Both of these animals were heavily regulated, deeply expensive, and considered the exclusive property of the absolute monarch.
They were the physical embodiment of state power. Now, the monastic texts explicitly note that monks were not organizing hunting parties to take down the king's war elephants.
I could have not.
Right. The intersection between monks and these animals happened almost exclusively during catastrophic environmental crises.
The famines.
Yes, the sources mention massive famines. During a severe drought, even the royal stables suffer. The state elephants and the cavalry horses would starve to death.
Yeah.
And the citizens, driven to absolute desperation, would butcher these dead state animals in the streets just to survive.
Just scavenging.
Exactly. And maintaining their devotion, even in starvation, they would offer portions of this butchered royal meat to the wandering monks.
They are attempting to generate spiritual merit in the darkest of times.
Right, offering the only protein available.
But here's where the logic breaks down for me. The animal is already dead from natural causes. The citizens are starving. The monk is a beggar who has explicitly renounced all worldly politics and secular society. He lives under a tree.
Yeah.
Why would eating a piece of dead, scavenged meat be a problem for him? Why does the Buddha care if the meat used to belong to the king's army?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's because the Buddha understood the paranoia of absolute monarchs. Yes. A wandering ascetic claiming to be outside of politics is still physically standing inside the king's borders. Even if the animal died naturally, consuming the king's property is an act of profound political disrespect.
It's terrible optics.
It's worse than bad optics. It looks like subversion.
Oh, I see.
If the royal ministers report to the king that a new, rapidly growing sect of wandering ascetics is feasting on the flesh of the royal elephants and horses, the king's immediate thought isn't going to be about famine relief.
No, definitely not.
His thought will be, are they poaching my military assets? Are they ritually absorbing the power of the state? Are they building a rebellion?
They turn themselves into a political target.
Exactly.
The Buddha realizes that for his monks to survive the volatile politics of ancient India, they must be aggressively, visibly apolitical.
Totally neutral.
They cannot afford even the slightest appearance of disrespect toward the crown. Banning elephant and horse meat is essentially a treaty of neutrality. It communicates to the ruling class, we do not touch the instruments of your power. We are not a threat to the state.
It is a phenomenal policy of institutional survival, and frankly, the texts make it clear that the monks were not sacrificing a culinary delight either.
Right.
The ban protected them from treason, but it also saved them from a terrible meal.
Yeah, the historical sources are hilariously specific about the quality of this meat. Elephant meat is described as impossibly tough, stringy, and coarse. It requires massive amounts of boiling just to be chewable.
That's awful.
And horse meat, depending on the diet of the horse and the decay in the heat, is described in the text as incredibly foul-smelling and fishy.
So gross.
So a monk eating this would be risking the wrath of an absolute monarch for a truly repulsive dinner.
Yeah, the pragmatic choice is obvious. Avoid the king's wrath, avoid the terrible food. But as we move past the royal animals, the Buddha's legislative focus shifts from the top of the socio-political hierarchy to the absolute lowest depths.
The outcasts.
Right. He moves from the fear of the king to the visceral, gag-inducing disgust of the common people. The next two animals on the Mamsa 10 are dogs and snakes.
And to really grasp the dog ban, we have to perform a massive mental reset.
Yeah.
If you were listening to this, you need to completely erase the modern concept of a dog from your mind.
Oh, absolutely.
We are not talking about a golden retriever sleeping at the foot of your bed. In the context of ancient India, Dogs were a source of profound horror and impurity.
They were pariah dogs, feral, aggressive, heavily diseased scavengers, and their primary hunting ground dictates their status in society, the charnel grounds.
Right, a charnel ground wasn't a neat, manicured cemetery with headstones. It was an open-air disposal site.
Exactly.
Wood for cremation was incredibly expensive, meaning only the wealthy could afford to have their bodies fully reduced to ash. For the vast majority of the population, a body was simply carried to the edge of the forest, placed in a charnel ground, and left to decompose in the open air, exposed to the elements and the scavengers.
And these feral dogs survived by consuming human corpses.
Right, which is just wow.
Because of this diet, they were viewed as the ultimate vessel of impurity. The cultural pollution associated with these animals was absolute.
Yeah, the caste system in ancient India was rigidly enforced, heavily stratified by concepts of purity and pollution. The texts point out that only the absolute most marginalized, ostracized groups, often referred to as chandalas or outcasts, would ever even consider eating dog meat.
People forced to live outside the city walls.
Exactly, people who had to handle corpses. And even they usually only ate it under threat of starvation.
So imagine a wandering monk, someone who is supposed to represent the highest spiritual ideals, walking into a village smelling of cooked dog meat,
Oh, man.
or being seen consuming it during a famine. It triggers a phenomenon the Buddhist texts call lokavajja.
Lokavajja. Societal condemnation, the visceral disgust of the world.
Exactly. If a monk engages in an act that makes the general public physically nauseous, the relationship is instantly severed.
Yeah, you can't teach them after that.
You cannot serve as a spiritual guide for a community that views your behavior as fundamentally degraded and polluted. If society gags when they look at you, they will never listen to your teachings.
That makes so much sense.
The Buddha recognized that spiritual elevation requires maintaining a baseline of dignity within the cultural context of the people you are trying to reach.
So the dog ban prevents the monks from becoming social pariahs. But the inclusion of the snake is far more complex. It's not just about disgust.
No, it's not.
You immediately think of the physical danger venom. Cooking methods in the ancient forest might not fully neutralize a cobra's venom glands.
Right. Eating a poorly prepared snake could lead to severe neurological shutdown and death.
But the historical sources emphasize a completely different reason for the ban. It's deeply rooted in the mythology of the region.
Yeah. In ancient Indian cosmology, snakes, particularly cobras, known as nagas, occupied a massive cultural footprint. They were not just reptiles. They were semi-divine beings.
Protectors.
Exactly. Nagas were deeply embedded in the folklore as protectors of the earth, guardians of hidden subterranean treasures, and beings capable of controlling the weather. Specifically, the rains needed for agriculture.
And crucially, they were known for being incredibly vengeful if they were disrespected.
Oh, very vengeful.
There's a brilliant story in the text that reads almost like a diplomatic treaty. The king of the Nagas, a leader named Supasa, actually manifests and approaches the Buddha with a formal request.
Yeah, Supasa essentially files a diplomatic grievance.
Right.
He explicitly asks the Buddha to forbid his monks from consuming snake meat. He points out that his people, the Nagas, are everywhere, and if monks eat snake, it will incite the wrath of the serpent kingdom.
So the Buddha agrees, and the ban is established. But let's look at the mechanics of why the Buddha would agree to this from a practical standpoint.
Okay.
Put yourself in the shoes of a local farmer in a tiny agricultural village. Your entire livelihood depends on the monsoon rains, which you believe are controlled by the Naga spirits.
Right.
Suddenly, a wandering monk sits down under the village banyan tree, and you find out he just ate a cobra for breakfast.
The village would be thrown into a state of absolute panic.
Complete terror. The villagers aren't going to think, oh, what a resourceful monk. They're going to think, this man is cursed.
He's a liability.
He has deeply offended the spirits that control our weather. If he stays here, the Nagas will strike our village with lightning or withhold the rain. We have to get rid of him immediately.
Because the fear of curses and spiritual retribution was a tangible material reality in these communities.
Yeah.
By banning snake meat, the Buddha is managing multiple layers of risk. He protects the monks from accidental envenomation. He honors a cultural treaty with a deeply respected mythological fashion. And most importantly, he ensures the monks are not viewed as harbingers of doom by the very villagers they rely on for daily food.
It's brilliant. We've watched the Mamsa 10 navigate public relations with cannibalism, high-level political treason with elephants, and deep societal taboos with dogs and snakes.
Yeah.
But here's where it gets really interesting. We move from social and political rules to raw biological survival. The second half of this list takes a dramatic, terrifying pivot.
It really does.
We leave the realm of social rules entirely, and we plunge straight into the dark, canopy-covered reality of the ancient Indian jungle. The final 5 animals on the list are strictly about survival against apex predators.
The texts specifically name them lions, tigers, leopards, panthers, often translated as yellow tigers and bears.
Let's focus on the big cats first. Picture the daily reality of a forest monk. They do not live in heavily fortified monasteries with stone walls and guarded gates.
No, they practice Aranakanga.
Right, the ascetic practice of dwelling deep in the forest. They sit in the dark, under trees, or in shallow caves.
Very exposed.
So occasionally a local hunter might manage to kill a tiger or a leopard that was threatening a village.
Right.
The hunter butchers the animal and offers some of the heavily spiced meat to a wandering monk.
Right.
The monk eats it. But the biological consequences of digesting that meat are lethal.
It all comes down to the mechanics of scent and pheromones. When a human consumes the meat of a massive apex predator, the digestion process breaks down those specific animal proteins. The unique pheromones of that big cat seep into the monk's sweat glands.
Wow.
It taints their breath. It emanates from their pores.
And remember the monks' hygiene practices. They wore pimsukula robes, literally rag robes pieced together from discarded cloth found in graveyards or trash heaps.
Right.
They did not have access to daily hot showers or laundry detergent. They are sweating in the jungle heat, basically marinating in the biological signature of the meat they just ate.
And in the deep jungle, where visibility is incredibly limited by the dense flora, scent is the primary language of survival.
It's everything.
It dictates territory, mating, and the hierarchy of the food chain. When a monk ate tiger meat, he essentially turned his own body into a biological beacon.
Imagine sitting in pitch-black darkness, trying to focus on your breath, completely unaware that you're broadcasting a massive territorial challenge to every predator within a 5-mile radius.
And the texts document the horrific consequences. To the wild cats roaming the jungle, the scent radiating from the monk signaled one of 2 things.
What were they?
Either it smelled like a rival predator invading their established territory, triggering an immediate violent territorial defense, or, more gruesomely, it smelled like the fresh blood of their own species, triggering a vengeful predatory response.
Oh, man.
Monks were being actively stalked and mauled to death in the middle of their meditations.
The environment was reacting directly to what the monks were bringing into it. But when you read the text, there is a very specific linguistic choice the Buddha makes that I find fascinating.
Oh, the specificity.
Yeah. He doesn't issue a blanket statement. Why did the Buddha ban them specifically by species, tiger, leopard, yellow tiger, instead of just saying, hey, no big cats?
Because the Buddha was intimately familiar with the human psychological tendency to search for loopholes.
Right, of course.
Particularly among highly intelligent monks who love to debate the fine print of monastic law.
The ancient equivalent of rules lawyering.
Exactly. If the Buddha had simply issued a ban on tigers, it is guaranteed that within a month, a hungry monk in the forest, offered a piece of leopard meat by a hunter, would say, well, the rule explicitly forbids tiger. This is clearly a leopard.
The spots prove it.
Right. I'm legally in the clear.
The Buddha didn't mention spots.
Exactly. By exhaustively naming every single species of dangerous feline in the geographic region, the Buddha surgically removed every possible legal loophole.
That's smart.
He anticipated the rationalizations of a hungry mind and preemptively shut them down. But there's another layer to this specificity.
Which is?
Naming the specific animals highlights the fact that these predators operate with entirely different hunting mechanics, requiring different survival awareness.
Ah. Okay, because the mechanics of the threat change depending on the cat. Tigers are ambush predators, but they are incredibly heavy and generally stay on the ground.
Right.
They are known for their terrifying ability to track a scent stealthily over long distances. If you smell like a tiger, you might be stalked for days without ever seeing the animal until it strikes.
But leopards, however, possess a completely different biological advantage. They are incredibly agile and are primarily arboreal. They live, hunt, and cache their kills in the canopy.
In the trees.
Right. And the texts actually point this out. If a monk realizes he's being tracked by a tiger, his immediate instinctual panic response might be to scramble up the nearest tall tree to get out of striking range.
Which makes sense for a tiger.
But if the monk has eaten leopard meat and his pheromones have attracted a leopard, climbing a tree is the worst possible action he could take.
Oh, wow.
He essentially corners himself. He climbs directly into the leopard's bedroom, stripping away any chance of escaping on the ground.
So the specificity of the MOMSA 10 is a masterclass in localized survival. You cannot have a vague awareness of danger. You must understand the specific behavioral mechanics of the threat hunting you.
Absolutely.
It's like a desperately needed patch update for jungle survival. But we have one final predator on the list, the bear.
The bear.
Bears are obviously a massive physical threat. They are faster than horses over short distances, incredibly aggressive, and their sense of smell is exponentially stronger than any of the big cats. They can smell food for miles.
They really can.
But the historical sources highlight a much darker, eerier reason for why the monks were forbidden from eating them. It goes beyond the fear of being mauled.
It touches on profound visual trauma.
How so?
When a hunter kills a bear and skins it to prepare the meat, the underlying anatomy of the bear is disturbingly hominid.
Oh, it's shocking. Without the fur, the musculature of the chest, the proportions of the limbs, and particularly the structure of the paws, which look exactly like human hands with elongated fingers, it looks like a skinned human being.
It does, and the visual similarity creates a severe psychological revulsion. In modern robotics and animation, we call this the uncanny valley.
Right.
When something looks almost human but is just slightly off, it triggers a deep instinctual feeling of dread and disgust in the human brain.
Now combine that uncanny valley effect with the profound psychological isolation of a forest monk. They are already fasting, meditating for hours, sleep-deprived.
Very vulnerable state.
If a hunter offers them a slab of bear meat, the visual experience of looking at that meat, preparing it, and eating it flirts dangerously with the very first prohibition on the list, cannibalism.
It creates a cognitive dissonance that shatters the meditative state.
Completely.
The monk isn't just worried about a live bear smelling him. He is grappling with the horrific sensation that he is consuming something fundamentally adjacent to humanity. It destabilizes the mind.
So what does this all mean? We've reached the end of the MOMSA 10. Let's look at the entire board.
Let's do it.
Humans, elephants, horses, dogs, snakes, lions, tigers, leopards, panthers, and bears. It's an incredibly diverse list. But wait, why aren't sharks or crocodiles on the list? They're just as deadly.
Well, that omission tells us everything about the pragmatic nature of the Vinaya.
Because of where they were.
Exactly. These rules were not drafted in a philosophical vacuum. They are deeply rooted in contextual geography. The historical Buddha lived and taught primarily in the plains and dense forests of the Ganges Basin in northern India.
So the rules addressed the actual physical reality the monks were walking through every day.
Exactly. The monks were walking through tiger territory. They were sleeping under trees where leopards hunted. They were walking through tall grass filled with cobras.
So the probability was high.
The probability of a monk encountering these specific animals was incredibly high. Conversely, these monks were not deep-sea diving in the Indian Ocean.
Right.
They were not spending hours wading waist-deep in estuarine swamps. The probability of a monk being offered shark meat or being ambushed by a crocodile while meditating was statistically insignificant.
The Buddha was not interested in legislating hypothetical scenarios. He wasn't writing an encyclopedia of every dangerous animal on Earth. He was writing a survival manual for his immediate environment.
When we synthesize the entire MOMSA 10, we see a brilliant three-tiered framework of protection.
Okay, let's recap those first.
First, biological safety. Keeping the monks from turning themselves into pheromone beacons for apex predators, protecting them from venom, and keeping them out of the jaws of tigers and bears.
Second, social stability. Keeping the monks completely apolitical by avoiding the royal elephants and horses, and preventing them from becoming social pariahs by avoiding the deeply stigmatized dog and the mythologically dreaded snake.
And third, psychological training.
Right.
The entire purpose of the monastic life is mental cultivation. The bans on human and bear meat prevent the profound trauma and empathy destruction associated with cannibalism.
You can't meditate if you're traumatized.
Exactly. You cannot achieve a serene, enlightened state if you are constantly terrified of being tracked by a leopard, hunted by the king's guards, or traumatized by the uncanny valley of your own dinner.
It is a flawless system of holistic protection. But there's a massive glaring contradiction here that we have to address.
I think I know where you're going with this.
I can imagine a listener pulling their car over right now, yelling at their dashboard. If so much is banned, and Buddhism is globally famous for its profound emphasis on nonviolence, the principle of ahimsa, why didn't the Buddha just ban meat entirely?
It's the big question.
How do monks even eat? Why have a highly specific list of 10? Why not just say the monastic order is strictly vegetarian? End of discussion.
That is the pivotal central tension of the entire monastic dietary code. And the answer lies in one of the most heavily debated concepts in Buddhist history, Tiki Parasuddhamamsa.
Tiki Parathudimamsa.
Yes, which translates to the three pure meats. This is the highly specific set of conditions under which a monk is permitted to consume animal flesh.
The loophole of compassion. Break down the mechanics of the three pure meats. How can meat possibly be considered pure in a religion of nonviolence?
It revolves entirely around the mechanics of intention and the specific role of the monk as a beggar. For a piece of meat to be considered pure and permissible for a monk to eat, it must pass a rigorous three-layered filter.
Okay, layer one.
Number 1. Unseen. The monk must not have seen the animal being slaughtered.
Layer two.
Number 2. Unheard. The monk must not have heard the animal screaming or being killed.
So they can't be present at the butchering, but what is the third layer?
The third is the most crucial. Unsuspected.
Unsuspected.
The monk must have absolutely no reason to suspect that the animal was slaughtered specifically to provide his meal.
Give me a practical example of how this works in an ancient village.
Okay, so a monk walks into a village for his morning alms round. He stops in front of a modest farmer's house.
Okay.
The family had slaughtered a chicken the previous night for their own dinner, and they have some leftover chicken stew in a pot. When they see the monk, they scoop some of that leftover stew into his bowl.
So they just share what they already have.
Exactly. Under the rule of the three pure meats, the monk is completely permitted to eat it. Why? Because the chicken was going to die regardless of the monk's existence. The intent behind the killing was to feed the family, not to feed the monastic order. The monk's presence did not cause the animal's death.
I have to push back hard on this because the economic logic feels incredibly thin.
How so?
Even if the monk is just taking leftovers, he is still consuming calories from the village's finite supply. If he eats the leftover chicken, the family has less food for the next day, which means they have to slaughter the next chicken sooner than they normally would.
Right, the indirect demand.
Exactly. By accepting the meat, isn't the monk indirectly driving the demand for slaughter? How did the Buddha justify this indirect chain of karma?
It is a phenomenal question, and it strikes at the heart of how the Buddha defined the monastic identity. You have to understand the literal translation of the word for monk, bhikkhu.
Bhikkhu.
It translates to beggar or one who asks for alms. A bhikkhu is, by definition, structurally removed from the economic supply chain.
Meaning they have no buying power.
Exactly. They possess no currency. They cannot place orders with a butcher. They cannot demand specific foods. They are entirely passive receivers of whatever the world discards or offers.
So they are meant to be a zero-friction presence in society.
Precisely. The Buddha prioritized making the monastic order incredibly easy to support. Imagine if he had mandated strict vegetarianism.
Oh, that'd be tough.
A poor, marginalized villager who only has some leftover dried fish to offer sees a monk approaching. If the monk refuses the fish, demanding a specialized vegetarian meal that requires expensive grains or fresh vegetables, the monk becomes an enormous economic burden on the very people he is trying to help spiritually.
The villager feels inadequate. They are robbed of the opportunity to practice generosity and make spiritual merit because they can't afford the pure diet.
Exactly. The Buddha's framework is profoundly pragmatic. He recognized that demanding absolute systemic purity in a deeply flawed, violent world is impossible. The three pure meats rule prevents the monks from actively inciting violence. They cannot commission a slaughter, while ensuring they remain accessible and humble enough to accept whatever the poorest villager has to offer.
It's compromise between the ideal of nonviolence and the messy reality of human survival.
It is.
But that kind of nuanced compromise rarely sits well with extremists. I have to imagine that in a spiritual community, there were people who looked at this three pure meats rule and thought, this is a cop-out, this is hypocrisy.
You are entirely correct. The tension over this exact compromise erupted into the greatest, most devastating schism in the history of early Buddhism.
Really?
The monastic order fractured, and the rebellion was led by a man named Devadatta.
And Devadatta wasn't just a random monk. This was the Buddha's own cousin.
Yes.
Talk about ancient family drama turning into a geopolitical crisis. What was Devadatta's motivation?
Devadatta was incredibly ambitious. As the Buddha aged, Devadatta desperately wanted to take over the leadership of the Sangha, the monastic community.
A power grab.
Completely. But he knew he couldn't challenge the Buddha on pure philosophical wisdom. So he recognized a market opportunity. Ancient India was a highly competitive marketplace for ascetics.
Because there were lots of different groups.
Yes, there were other traditions, notably the Jains, who practiced forms of extreme asceticism and radical nonviolence that made the Buddhists look somewhat relaxed by comparison.
Oh yeah, the Jains would literally sweep the ground in front of them so they wouldn't accidentally step on an insect. Their
Mhm.
commitment to nonviolence was absolute.
Exactly. Devadatta looked at that competitive landscape and realized he could outflank the Buddha politically by appealing to the most zealous, hardcore monks in the order.
So what did he do?
He approached the Buddha and publicly proposed 5 new, mandatory, ultra-strict rules.
Hmm.
And the centerpiece of his proposal was that all monks must observe strict, lifetime vegetarianism.
Oh wow.
No 3 pure meats, no loopholes, total abstinence from animal flesh.
That is a brilliant and dangerous political trap.
It really is.
Devadatta is putting the Buddha in an impossible position. He is essentially saying, look at me. I am willing to suffer more for the animals. I am more compassionate than the founder of the religion.
Right.
If the Buddha agrees to the rules, he concedes leadership to Devadatta. If he refuses, he looks like a hypocrite who secretly likes eating meat.
How did the Buddha navigate out of that trap without destroying his own credibility?
The Buddha's counter-argument is recorded in a text called the Amaganda Sutta, and it is a masterpiece of philosophical reframing.
What did he say?
The Buddha completely rejected Devadatta's 5 rules, but instead of defending the taste of meat, he redefined the entire concept of purity. Devadatta argued that the physical consumption of dead flesh is what creates a stench or impurity in human beings.
Of biological contamination.
Yes. The Buddha countered that the true stench of humanity has absolutely nothing to do with what enters the stomach.
The Buddha argued that you can be the strictest vegetarian in the world, surviving entirely on the purest roots, leaves, and spring water. But if your mind is infested with greed, anger, malice, deceit, and jealousy, you are spiritually putrid.
You are rotting from the inside out. He
Exactly.
flips the script. He's saying, you are obsessing over the purity of your plate while your mind is a cesspool.
Precisely. Conversely, a monk who accepts a piece of leftover meat out of humble gratitude, while maintaining a mind of perfect loving-kindness and absolute detachment, remains spiritually immaculate.
The Buddha exposed the psychological rot underneath Devadatta's proposal. Spiritual ego.
This raises an important question, right? Devadatta wasn't trying to save the animals, he was trying to build an elite club.
He wanted a hierarchy of purity where his monks could look down on everyone else.
It is the ultimate danger of asceticism. When you define your spiritual worth by what you refuse to consume, you breed immense arrogance. You weaponize your diet as a tool for superiority.
Wow.
The Buddha refused to allow the monastic diet to become a source of ego, division, and elitism. The middle way prioritizes the state of the mind over the contents of the stomach.
Devadatta actually ends up taking a significant faction of monks and splintering the community over this. But the Buddha's pragmatic, intent-focused framework survived as the core of the tradition.
It did.
This entire historical saga is mind-blowing, but I want to pull all of this incredible ancient history out of the jungle and bring it directly into the room with you, the listener.
Okay.
Because unless you're currently wearing a rag robe and walking barefoot through the forests of northern India, you might be thinking, I'm not a monk wandering the ancient Indian forests. How does this apply to me?
The application becomes incredibly clear when we examine how the texts instruct laypeople, ordinary citizens, to interact with these rules.
Let's get into that.
It is crucial to note that laypeople are not bound by the monastic Mamsa 10. You will not commit a Thulakaya offense for eating a hot dog.
Good to know.
However, there is a strict ethical boundary concerning the interaction between a layperson and a monk.
Right. If a layperson deliberately offers forbidden meat to a monk, knowing the monk isn't allowed to eat it.
The texts treat that act as a severe moral violation. Why? Because you are intentionally forcing someone else to break their vows.
Like secretly putting poison in a parent's food.
Exactly. The commentaries use that exact comparison. Even if the parent consumes it blindly and suffers, the moral weight, the karma of the deception and the harm, falls entirely on the person who served it.
It is about the profound violation of trust and boundaries. If someone in your life has taken a vow, whether it's sobriety, a religious fast, or even a severe medical allergy, and you attempt to sneak something past them because you think their rule is silly, you are committing a deep act of violence against their autonomy.
Absolutely.
But beyond how we treat others, the Buddha also left us a framework for how we treat ourselves, right? A way to apply the vigilance of the monks to our own daily lives.
Yes. He taught a meditation practice called Patikulasana.
Patikulasana. What is that?
It translates to reflecting on the gross, functional, and deeply unromantic nature of food. The practice requires you to visualize the food breaking down in your mouth, traveling through your digestive tract, and becoming bodily waste.
Which sounds completely disgusting. It sounds like a great way to ruin a dinner party.
Well, it isn't designed to shame you for enjoying a meal. It is designed to break the trance of mindless, dopamine-driven consumption.
Oh, I see.
The goal is to reach a state where you eat to live, rather than live to eat. Think all the way back to the beginning of our deep dive, to Sepia.
Right, the woman with the thigh.
Sepia was acting out of pure devotion, but she lacked wisdom. She engaged in blind, unexamined consumption of her own fanaticism, and she literally harmed her physical body in the process.
And we do the exact same thing today, just in different forms.
Yeah, we really do.
We consume without thinking. We eat to soothe our anxiety after a terrible day at work. We plunge into extreme, punishing fad diets because an influencer convinced us it was the ultimate truth. We are acting with immense zealotry, but without a shred of wisdom.
The Moms of 10 forced the monks to maintain hypervigilance over their physical intake. They had to ask, where did this come from? Will this attract predators? Will this destroy my empathy?
And we need to do that too.
We must apply that exact same hypervigilance to our own lives. Before you consume something, you must pause and ask, why am I putting this into my body? Am I seeking actual nourishment? Am I eating to project social status? Am I trying to numb a feeling of deep despair?
We have covered massive ground today. We started with a visceral, bloody act of devotion in the closed markets of Varanasi. We decoded the geopolitical masterclass avoiding royal elephants and horses to survive an absolute monarchy.
Yeah, that was wild.
We stood in the dark jungle, broadcasting pheromones to tracking tigers and arboreal leopards, and we witnessed a philosophical civil war over the nature of purity, spiritual ego, and the loophole of compassion.
It is a profound testament to the utility of ancient texts. They aren't just relics, they are rigorous frameworks for navigating wildly complex biological, social, and psychological threats.
As we wrap up this deep dive, we always want to leave you with a final thought, a concept to carry with you as you go about your week.
Think about the mechanics of the Buddha's legislation. He looked at the vast, dangerous environment of ancient India, identified the specific biological and social threats, and said, these specific elements will destroy you. Do not consume them.
And today?
Today, our primary environment is no longer the jungle. It is the digital landscape. We consume staggering amounts of information, media, and algorithmically generated content every single hour, often without a second thought.
We are constantly grazing at a buffet of data, just letting it wash into our minds.
So imagine if you were tasked with writing an information Moms at 10 for your own life.
Oh, I love that.
A highly specific, uncompromising list of content and ideas that are strictly forbidden because they attract modern predators.
What are the predators in the digital canopy?
They are profound anxiety, performative outrage, political tribalism, and paralyzing despair. Consider the pheromones of the jungle. If you absorb the digital equivalent of a tiger, say, doom scrolling through 3 hours of hateful, vitriolic political arguments before bed, you do not just digest that information.
You carry the scent of it?
You carry the scent of it. It alters your baseline neurochemistry. It makes you hyperreactive, cynical, and exhausted. It changes how you speak to your family.
Yeah, it really does.
And most dangerously, it signals to the algorithms to feed you more of the same, attracting even more negativity into your psychological territory.
You turn yourself into a beacon for outrage.
Exactly. So what specific sources, apps, or types of arguments need to be on your information Moms of 10? What are the specific things you must stop consuming to protect your empathy and your peace of mind? Are you carefully curating your diet to nourish your intellect? Or are you just blindly feeding the beasts in the forest?
What a brilliant framework to end on. We love the illusion of a clean, binary world where things are either universally good or universally bad. But the reality of what we consume, whether it is a piece of meat in a starving ancient village or a stream of data on a glowing screen, is incredibly murky.
It really is.
It demands constant, relentless investigation. It demands wisdom over blind faith. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, investigate your sources, and be fiercely protective of what you allow into your mind.